Hello and welcome to The Mariner with me, Chris Stanmore Major. Now today we're going to look at preventers. The last video I did was about the Sydney Hobart and those two terrible accidents that have led to 2 fatalities. I'm getting messages from people now who are much more aware of the wind conditions at the time and the likely situation on board those boats. And what it seems to be is that they're uncontrolled jibes. So today we're going to talk about preventers. Okay, what we're going to do today is we're going to have a look at this video from my mate John Shaffer over at the Ministry of Sailing. John's intent with this video is to create a forum where people can think about sailing from an objective point of view, look at empirical facts, get the data and understand the fact that what happens on the ocean is not art or mystery or the way you're feeling about it that day. It's hard, cold physics. And physics is going to physics whether you like it or not. The preventer is a piece of equipment which is not rigged on new boats, and I am becoming increasingly aware of the fact it's not rigged on many boats. John's video is a lot more balanced, shall we say, than my opinion on this subject, because he's asking us as the jury to look at the case of a midships rather than a forward rigged preventer. But I can be judge, jury and executioner here without needing to get anybody else involved whatsoever. I have been out on the vasty deep for most of my life. I have seen things that'll melt the face off you, and I'm telling you the preventer is one of the most important pieces of equipment in heavy downwind sailing, and as we saw at the video at the weekend, even in light air sailing, because the boom is a heavy piece of equipment. It is connected to the boat by a joint which is pretty much a universal joint, and if you don't have some kind of control on the other end of that spar, it will come out of control in an instant and can easily be in a position to, as we have unfortunately seen in the Sydney Hobart race, can kill you. There's no two ways about it. The Mariner's Library is supported by Edward William Marine Insurance. If you're looking for a new policy on your boat or to upgrade the policy that you already have, check out edwardwilliam.com and get a free quote. And if you follow the link in the podcast description or use the code MARINER10 at checkout, you get an exclusive 10% discount deal and help support the production of the Mariner's Library.
On trial today is the Midships preventer. Some call them saints, others call them sinners. That's exactly right. This is going to be your chance to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner in the case of the midship preventer versus the forward preventer. Get ready for a massive roll-up.
Okay. Oh. What does it say on their shirts? Main thing we have to realize here is you can talk about midships preventers, and that's kind of 2 different things. A midships preventer that goes from somewhere down by the rigging on the side deck and comes up and joins the boom around and about the vang. That is the most spectacularly stupid piece of rigging it is possible to imagine on a boat. We're just going to discount that because those people, that's just a Darwin Award situation. And there's another kind of side deck preventer, one that comes from the back of the boat somewhere, goes to some turning block or cleat or whatever it is on the side deck of the boat, and then goes up to the end of the boom. This is fractionally better. When the boom is in a position where it is being held by something with a narrow rigging angle, it is already stupid. So with that in mind, let's have a look at what's going on here. Make sure you subscribe.
From the Ministry of Sailing, and in this edition of the Sailor's Debrief, you get to be the judge. That's right, folks. Put your hand on the offshore special regulations from World Sailing, and bailiff,
I'll put my hand on experience.
In this case, you're going to find out that the midship preventer is being accused of being utterly ridiculous and dangerous. But according to the defendant, his 40 years of experience and over 300,000 views on his YouTube, he is the right way.
This is a danger of the modern world and social media.
By the Maritime New Zealand Special Investigation Report on one particular case. So let's watch the litigants in this case as they present both sides of the story. And in the end, you will be able to decide for yourselves which one is right and which one?
I can't be on this jury, I'm too biased.
Tie the preventer line to the end of the boom with a bowline. I'm now coming forward with the preventer line, and I'm going to reeve it so that it's outside of everything. Then I'll come down and come into the midship cleat from the outside.
How is that?
And I'm going to put it in through the middle of this midship cleat. I'll put it under the jib sheet so it runs fair along the side deck. Back in the cockpit, we'll put it either on a winch or a cleat. I happen to have a cleat handy here, so that's what I'll use. Now that
okay, so let's break this down Barney style. As it looks here on the page, it doesn't look too bad, all right? You've got the red line there, which is indicating where the preventer runs. It goes from the end of the boom, which is tied with a bowline. Like, how does that stay on the end of the boom? So it's not quite at the end of the boom. We're just choosing to give away however many degrees of rigging angle here because the bowline slips down. But okay, we'll ignore that. It's on or near the end of the boom. And it's running forward, looks pretty good so far, and it's not that big a change in angle to run it to the front of the boat. But bearing in mind, on your mast, every single thing that happens on the mast is to do with the minimum angles that can be maintained. If this is the top of my spreaders here, and this is the cap shroud coming up and wrapping round, you can't give away length on spreaders because, oh, I want less weight aloft, because you're going to get to minimum angles whereby then the end of the mast is not secured. Here on the boom, you are giving away angles. When you give away the fact that it's not attached to the front of the boat, you give away some angle. You give away some rigging angle when the bowline slides down invariably along the boom. So you've already given away probably 10 or 15 degrees, 10 degrees for sure. Let's say 10 degrees you've given away because the bowline moved and you didn't run it to the front of the boat. So already, you know, it's not great, but it's pretty good enough, right? And that's the thing, is that pretty good enough is maybe not going to be enough when shit starts to hit the fan. The next thing that's going to happen, obviously, when this sail backs is that the boom is going to shift because of the stretch in the line. Now, we saw when he went down the side deck, that little green line that he had, I don't think that was Dyneema. That's double braid. Why would that boat have Dyneema on board? Unless you're specifically choosing it for the task, it's just a double braid line made of polyester with between 5 and 10% stretch. 5 and 10% stretch, that's a 40-foot boat he's on. It's going from the back cleat to the front of the boat, so that's 20 foot. It's turning and going to the boom, which here is about another 10 feet. There's 30 foot. Let's give him 10% stretch because it makes the numbers easy. That's 3 foot of stretch. 3 foot of stretch, and the boom has now moved, and it hasn't just moved away from where it's rigged, it's moved closer to the center line. It has now changed the angle on that rigging and decreased it yet further. So we gave away 5 degrees on the bowline slipping, we gave away probably 5 or maybe 10 degrees on it not running to the front of the boat, and now the boom's come in and we've just given away another 10 degrees on the rigging angle, 15 degrees on the rigging angle, it could be 20 degrees. But suddenly we've gone from a rigging angle that was kind of like sort of good enough to absolutely definitely not good enough. The boom is now going to be creating massive forces on that line because most of what the line is doing is pulling the boom into compression. The line is under tension because the boom is trying to compress up against the gooseneck. Let's go forward a little bit here to see how that plays out. I do like his diagrams.
If you do have an accidental jibe.
Okay, perfect. Great diagram. So now the boom is over the back quarter. So you have to think, oh, if I had my boom and it's just sitting on the back quarter there, you could actually test this on your own boat, right? Sail along, just beating, and get a line and take it from the midships and put it up on the end of the boom and then just tack the boat and see what happens. The boom is going to stretch that line easily because the rigging angle between the side of the deck and the boom, it's basically a straight line. How is it possibly holding the boom in position now? All it's going to do is in normal operation have 5 to 10% stretch, and then we're going to go to beyond its elastic limit, and then we're going to stretch it. So at the very least, you've got a preventer line which is repeatedly getting weaker and weaker as it's stretched way beyond what it's meant to do. But what's going to happen is it's going to just break. By the time the boom is over the back quarter, over the cleat, what he's talking about, what he's showing in his own diagram, the force on the line, it's purely under tension there. That's all that's happening. There is no ability to stop the boom from moving around. And anybody that thinks there is living in a dream world. That is magical thinking, not connected to facts.
When it's rigged to the midship cleat, can end up bending your lifeline stanchions during an accidental jibe,
That is
as
the
the
least
boom
of your
starts
concerns.
across the boat
That might slow it
and
down
is
a bit.
arrested
At
by
least the rigging angle
preventer.
gets better.
Now let's hear from the plaintiff, the
John's so much
forward
calmer than I am.
preventer. Don't forget, folks, take your job as a
Do
juror
subscribe to
seriously
John's
and
channel here, hey?
comment below.
And for the last 40 years, one of my biggest safety concern has been the boom and the accidental jibe.
Very wise.
It starts here, my preventer, at the end of the boom.
As
two
it should.
preventers, one on each side.
To a
and then
designed hard
forward
point.
to the gooseneck. On the forward
Dyneema
end
lashings.
of the boom, by the gooseneck, and I have one preventer line set on each side. Just fitted.
Okay, I can see what he's going to do, and it's kind of correct, but there's one essential error in here, which is the material that this section on the boom is made up from. I think what he's about to tell us, he's got Dyneema lashings. There's no way that he's going to put Dyneema lashings in and then not put a piece of Dyneema next to the boom. Okay, great. Then he's going to run it to the bow because this is the forward preventer presentation. Okay, great. He's going to bring it back to the cockpit. Wonderful. The Dyneema's got like 4% stretch. It's going to be much better at hold. Okay, great. The problem is that can end up in a situation where the boat gets knocked down and the boom is being prevented super high up in the air. And when it does finally pop, which this tiny little 10mm line is going to pop at, is it 10, I don't ever have to go down to 10. Is it like 4,800 kilos, like 10,000 pounds? That 10mm line is toast, right? It's out of there. Not counting the splices, any knots, jammers, anything else that's in there. It's a very small line. But the key thing is that you want stretch in the preventer system a little bit. You want to prevent a crash jibe, yes, but you don't want to be in a situation where the boom is pinned out to windward. So you go through your crash jibe, the boat's now on its side, the lee rail's in the water, it's on the cabin top, and the boom is being held up and the mainsail is just pressing the boat down into the water. At that point, one of two things will happen. Either the little line will break and it will come explosively down and meet the crew who themselves are down in that area because the crash jibe, or it's going to hold it until the mainsail gets flat on the water and the pressure's released, at which point the boat will be over like 100, 110 degrees. So you have to have a bit of ease in the system because you don't want explosive release of the preventer, and you want the boom to come through smoothly and slowly and slow it down. It's a suspension system for the boom as well as a preventer.
Here, from here, the preventer continues with another line which is parked alongside.
Where is
the
that?
boat.
Is that St.
Let's go
Martin?
then.
I'd say St.
My
Martin.
preventer. That is the green part now, and this is connected to the eye that I have just shown.
Okay. So hang on. So his line on the side deck is also tied with a bowline. So if you go to the Mariner Patreon page, we've got like seamanship lessons there, and one of the first one is about strength of lines and about knots and hitches and all the rest of it. His line's a Dyneema, which means it's a kern mantle rope. There is a core that's strong and a sheath that's weak, but is there to help with friction, to do with line differentiation, to do with, you know, the line being usable every day, because Dyneema is very soft and fluffy and not that useful. The exterior of the line is what's in friction, holding knots together. The exterior of the line on a kern mantle rope is holding like 10 to 15% of the strength of the line. It's nothing compared to everything else. Whenever you tie a knot, even if it's a bowline, the bowline is relying on the friction on the sheath of the line. It will break. So all the Dyneema lashings, all the Dyneema line, everything in this system is all for nothing if you've tied it with a knot, because the knot won't hold. And if you don't know, if down in the comments below you think a knot will hold as much as a splice, please put knots are great. If you think that splices are the only thing that will hold anywhere near to the actual breaking strain of Dyneema line, you can put I love splices. Okay, I once had this experience when we went to Marlow in the UK, and they had a hydraulic drawer, and they said, the guy that was running the show, I think it was Paul Honers, he said, put any kind of knot, hitch, anything you want at that end of the drawer, and I'm going to put a splice in here whilst you're working on that. So as we did it, he took the line, put a core splice inside a milked over sheath. So it's locked, it's held, and he loops it over one end. And then we get the other end, and I think I did like 5 round turns and 5 or 6 hitches. Okay, so much friction. How could it possibly move? And all that happened is the machine came under tension and it went pop and blew the sheath, and then the core just pulled out. It didn't even have any load on it as the core pulled out. Have a look at the YouTube channel How Not To, which is all about this. The guy was a slackliner and climber and now just does lots of destructive testing on Dyneema and loops and fittings and everything else. Always when Dyneema kern mantle type lines break, the sheath goes and then the core pulls out. So I think on this boat that he's on, this has worked for him, but there's another error in here. There has to be some kind of suspension in the system so that the Dyneema doesn't recoil bang. That's not the danger, but that it will pop the sheath and it will unwind itself so fast that it's just like something failing, you know, like a pad eye failing or something else. So if he's going to tie it on the other end, that is an error. But if this was spliced with a Tylaska snap shackle, something like that, then we're back into the kind of groovy zone.
To a friction-free ring, and then
friction-free ring, nicely spliced. Little. Oh, he's got 2 of them.
I'm now sitting at the very bottom.
I think he was probably Clipper Crew.
So the preventer line from the end of the boom.
You don't need to. Just do one down the center and put it on either side.
And is then led forward and comes out like this.
Okay.
From the.
Okay, so in this diagram then we can see much more clearly. The end of the boom has now got a line that runs right to the front of the boat and then right back to the cockpit. It's shown here going back to a cleat. It's not to a cleat, it's to the cockpit. This means that, firstly, the major section of the line should be done in Dyneema. If it's the only piece of Dyneema you have on your boat, well, the other one would be for your sea anchor, but piece of Dyneema on your boat that you can use on a daily basis. It runs forward, it runs back, and it's got 4 to 5% stretch, which means even if your boat is 40 foot long, you've got 40 foot and then doubles back another 60 foot of line, 4% stretch, 10% would be 6 foot, 5% would be 3 foot. So we're dealing with less than a meter of stretch on the entire length of the boat. The boom is held out on the side and now it pops back to its backed position. The boom is now in the backed position. The wind's on the wrong side of it. Is that rigging angle still good? Yeah. It's fine, right? It's no problem at all. Now, what I'm saying is that we should have a piece of nylon or even polyester line alongside the boom, that 3-strand line, that's connected. Now, it will start to stretch because it can stretch up to 20%. Stretching, 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 and the boom passes over. We are not necessarily always trying to stop the boom from absolutely moving because of the knockdown issue. We're trying to get it to go through slowly. When it's gone through from a helming position, stay on that bloody jibe. If you have jibed the boat, don't jibe back unless there is mega danger. Don't jibe back. Just keep it on that angle. The worst case scenario, and we've seen it unfortunately in a lot of the examples that I've given on this, particularly the one with Andrew Ashman, the Clipper crewman that was killed, they don't know exactly when the accident that took his life happened because the boom went shunk, shunk. One of those did that to him. So if you jibe, stay on that jibe. Okay, let's sort this out. Don't be just flicking it back the other way because that now is a completely uncontrolled jibe. Whether you've got a midships preventer, a full proper forward rig preventer, when that boom comes back the other way, it is uncontrolled, right? So run it forward, bring it back, keep it on the winch. The circumference of your winch is much greater than you think. Next time you're down the boat, take a winch, wrap the line round until the drum is fully stacked, which is the only way you should operate a winch. All this stuff with 2 or 3 turns is child's business. You stack it up, that's the load now secured. Now unwrap that. How much of the line is coming out? Even with a little winch, you're going to have like this much line on a little winch. On my winches, it's like 2 or 3 meters is on the big winches when they're wrapped. That compared to a jammer, which has got a couple little teeth which are jamming into the rope, probably in the same position they always jam into the rope, you are just asking for the sheath to blow. But if the boat goes onto the other jibe, you want to be then getting that line off because now the preventer's in the cockpit. It can go around people's necks, getting the main sheet down tight. If the boat has to go through crazy jibes, make sure the main sheet's tight. It will try and round up into the wind. Keep the jib back so it doesn't round up into the wind. These are the things we need to discuss. But the very basics of it with the preventer, for God's sake, don't rig your preventer in the middle of the boom unless you want to have that terrible day when it doesn't work and you go, oh, he was right.
from the boom and goes here to the friction line and then back into
These
the
are like
cockpit
shoelaces,
where
these
it
lines.
can be adjusted.
But it's strong for this
and
boat.
detach the green part, which is parked by the stanchion.
Okay.
So the preventer is
Clipped
prolonged.
on,
That
side
is where
deck,
it is continuing
very nice.
to the bow and then back to the trimming side.
I don't know
So
what that
back
knot
here,
was he just did,
all
but
you
sure.
need to do
Don't use
is
a
then
knot.
You pull in the preventer, you close your clutch, and it's set. Big forces are underway here, especially when a jibe is approaching.
Yes.
So a strong line is important. I use
Not
a
much
Dyneema
tail on
line,
that, eh?
So I'm really sure that even this thin line is holding the force.
Look at the sheath being
The plaintiff
gently
thinks
worn away
it's
by
a
the jib sheets.
Very different approach. But the court thinks that there's not enough evidence, so we called in an expert witness. The most crucial role of a preventer is to stabilize
Some
the
kind of
boom
terrible
and prevent it from
reefing
uncontrolled
situation.
jibe.
Why is that
In a
person?
jibe, the force of the boom swinging
Oh my
across the cockpit.
God. I can tell from the water on the second one that it's the Solent. I think. Look at that image where I paused it. This thing of having people standing on the side deck, like holding back the main, it's like the boy with his finger in the dike. And I think she liked it, but he's just there like, this is going to be fine as the cracks radiate out. You're holding back the boom so it doesn't jibe. What happens if it does jibe? You use that situation, use that technique perhaps on very small boats to hold out the boom in situations where just the rolling of the boat will disturb the mainsail and lose the shape. So when you're going downwind, suddenly your main's all messy and it's not pulling as it should do. Okay, maybe somebody out there. But the reality is, the boat weighs many, many tons, and you're asking it to be moved along by this structure sticking out of it and all these sails and everything else. This many-ton boat is being moved by these forces, but what this 100-kilo maximum person that's on the side deck there is not going to be affected by the fact that they're at the wrong place in a Type 1 lever. Like, what's going on in this situation? So it's muggy, foggy, nasty weather for sure. We have got a reef going in, but no one's at the main. So the main is wrapped around the spreaders. And so the person that's driving the boat now is probably unable to like just discern the wind. They've got their hood on. They can't feel it on the back of their necks. They're not actively looking up at the top of the mast. No one does that anymore. No telltales on the shrouds to give you an indicator. They're just driving along and hopefully it's going to be okay. The massive worry here is that the people in the cockpit, one stood up, the other one is lying right next to the main sheet. We read that in the event of Andrew Ashman's unfortunate death on Clipper, that Clipper afterwards put a big area that they marked off with like hatches in the around the main sheet so that you cannot be sat there when the boom goes through. So this is supremely dangerous right now. And then of course, oh look buddy, you looked the wrong way.
In a jibe,
oh,
force the swinging across the cockpit.
Oh my lord.
Particularly in heavy winds.
And there's another jibe coming up right there. Is this a broken boom? Yeah, from a midships preventer. Maybe.
Can result in broken equipment such as
right, now watch this. This guy's going to back the mainsail. You.
And that can jeopardize the entire sailing voyage.
Okay, so that situation.
The court is going to introduce evidence from Note Re Re Moana Aotearoa, or what we would like to say, the New Zealand Maritime Incident Report on Platino. Here's the background of the incident. Off the coast of New Zealand, Platino was in a gale when an uncontrolled jibe, subsequent failure of the preventer, destroyed the Traveler, creating a runaway boom on a Ron Holland 66-foot sloop.
Well, hang on.
From side.
It destroyed the Traveler. If the Traveler is secured, there's no way, unless you damage the car, I guess. If you smash, I've never seen a car come apart, like just rip in pieces unless there's some underlying problem with it. The tall-on, if you've got a recirculating ball system on the Traveler, the tall-on balls are easily strong enough to hold that load. It won't pop off the Traveler. So something failed in there and they ended up with an uncontrolled boom, like out of nightmares that comes, you know, with a big boat like that. what's the thing that you do in that situation? You get out of the cockpit zone completely. You have to go forward of the mast, and that's lucky because the only thing that's forward of the mast is redemption. You cut the main halyard, the boom slops down to the water, it might take out the side deck, it might bring out the worst of your guardrails, it might even be in the water destroying your mainsail. But to be in that zone, as we learned from that SV Escape and what happened there, you cannot control the boom. You will not control the boom. You must do something else. Is this a midships preventer? No, not on a 70-foot boat.
It damaged the shrouds in such a way that the vessel dismasted. Subsequently, because of the loss of the Traveler and the swinging boom, one sailor was knocked overboard and lost at sea, and the other was killed instantly when he was hit. There were many conclusions in this report, but we're going to look at the ones that had to do with the preventer. This was an midship preventer they were using.
The most significant cause for the failure of the preventer was the arrangement rigged, which placed unnecessarily high load on the preventer's components. Do we need to have any further discussion on this? The suboptimal strength of the line used to extend the preventer and the pad eye which provided the anchor point also contributed to the manner in which the preventer failed. For preventers, you are best served by using Dyneema. Dyneema is otherwise known as Spectra in North America. High modulus polyethylene line was developed for mine shaft in South Africa originally. It's very, very strong, 5 times stronger by weight than steel. It is very, very capable of taking most of the loads on boats. Dyneema can be used for rigging, but you need to have pre-stretched and it needs to be quite a large size. But I've seen an open 60 with mast rigging, which is 1-inch Dyneema, because that's how they get past the creep. So Dyneema is incredibly strong. So the fact that it was subpar means it was double braid polyester, which you cannot use for a preventer on a 70-foot boat. This is where the rubber meets the road, where we have empirical numbers that have been drawn through the scientific process that we can now say this angle has this effect, this angle has that effect, this line can take this load, this line can't take the load. There's no way to waffle your way around these kind of facts. So there it is in numbers on that boat. Rigged from the midships position, you have a 6-degree angle. Imagine a mast which is in a boat, standing up, you come down to buy it, maybe you're like, oh, this is beautiful. And then you look at the mast and it's got rigging on it that's attached like 1/3 of the way up at a 6-degree angle. You'd be thinking, hell's teeth, that ain't gonna stay in there. That's like an ejecto rig, right? It's just gonna eject itself off the side of the boat as soon as it gets the opportunity. You wanna see at least the rigging going most of the way up the mast and as a wider base as possible. If a boom is thought of as being a mast, think about it then. How could that possibly work at such a narrow rigging angle?
And lengthening the line of the forward preventer. It would have reduced the loads by almost 9 times.
Of course it would.
Now at this point, I can't tell you whether that would have made a difference or not.
I can tell you it definitely would have made a difference.
Loads would have been significantly different.
On a 70-foot yacht, even if it's got a quite conservative rig on it, the preventer should be rigged from something like 14mm Dyneema for the main part of the line, going through appropriately sized clutches or jammers and coming back to a winch large enough to handle that kind of rope, okay? 14mm Dyneema line has got a breaking strain of about 7,800 kilos off the top of my head. It's going forwards, it's going around something, big pad eyes, cleats, like whatever it is, but the thing on the deck, if it fails, there's more than just that holding it, right? Because that's also catastrophic. The line goes through, it comes up. It has got a splice on the end of it, which has got a Tylaska shackle, which will easily handle this kind of load. It then comes to a piece of 3-strand polyester line or nylon line that's along the side of the boom, and the whole thing is out at like some massive angle. They're saying 27 degrees there. It could be 40 degrees if the boom is nicely out. That's the only way to do this. The idea, the thought pattern that that's going to hold just rigging it on the side deck comes from being on small boats with small sails in light conditions and not having the capacity to realize that there is a massive multiplying effect. We're talking about an order of magnitude bigger on their loads. And if they're saying it's not of the correct strength, that means that the line that they did use, let's say it's a piece of even at the worst case scenario, like it's one of their mooring lines or something like that, it probably will hold 2,500, 3,000 pounds before it breaks. But it is not going to hold 15 or 17,000 pounds when it's got a super tight angle and you've got a massive 70-foot boat's mainsail pulling against it. Particularly that rigging angle then, it's not even trying to hold the boom back. It's just a massive tension load that's going on the line as the boom, which is from the rope's point of view incompressible, just slowly gets longer from the line's point of view. If you run a line from the side deck to the boom and the boom moves across the boat, as soon as that rigging angle gets below like 10 degrees, basically the line's just in tension, and then it's just a massive draw on the line until it goes past its breaking point. And then people are lost because of it.
We can see that by increasing the angle of attack by 27 degrees.
Yeah, what's missing on here, what's missing on this diagram is the other forces. The force from the wind is certainly is large, even if it's a big gale, but it's never going to be that much because the wind will turn the boat back the other way, right? It's always going to align itself. There's forces, but the boat's drifting. Oh, I'm destroying the set while I'm trying to do this. The boat is drifting in the water, the boat's rocking and rolling. Even if it's under direct tension, there's going to be a lot of give and movement in that. It only has to hold for a while until that load is somehow eased and released some way, right? But in this situation, the other force that's in play is the fact that as the boom comes closer to the center line, it's pulling that line. It's under massive tension. So the force is coming this way and that way, yeah, but the mechanical advantage of cranking that thing round, that is like a big wrench on a stuck nut, and you're just increasing the length of it, and now your line is attached halfway along, and you get to a point where you can lever so far that you snap the line in tension, right? So the forces on a 70-foot yacht,
be much different.
I'd be expecting my preventer to hold
the difference of the loads that were experienced
probably
in computer modeling.
5,000 pounds, 2.5 tons.
Significantly lower.
Oh, here we go.
We can clearly.
All right, so 35 knots. The load on the preventer, it's difficult to understand exactly how that would go because the boat would be moving and stuff, but I trust that the professionals that made this this stuff for court, although I'm not sure if it says court evidence across it like that. It might be come from somewhere else, but look at the number. If these are correct, 4,600 kilos, so what's that, 10,000 pounds, against 2,500 pounds, 1,100 kilos. Look at the tiny increase in loading between 1,100 kilos and 1,700 kilos, between 2,500 pounds, let's say, and 4,000-ish pounds. And these other loads, which go from, what's that, 5,500 pounds to over 15,000 pounds. Do we need to have any more discussion about this? Let's let John's video play out. I love his videos. I love this format. Well done, John. Great videos.
The less the loads are going to be on the stress points.
That's cool. Physics, baby.
I can see there's an objection. Did the defender of the Midships have an opportunity to see the evidence from Lopatino? And the answer is yes. If you look at their final screen on their YouTube, you can see a link that goes directly to the case for Lopatino that the New Zealand Maritime Institute provided. Ministry of Sailing.
So this is classic YouTube, right? We'll put that up because that'll look good on the final page, and we'll do this and do that. But it is a formula, and what you do is you don't get better at sailing, you just get better at the algorithm, right? Like, share, subscribe down below. The point here is that if you've got a report which says specifically that the placement of the preventer is the defining failure, at the end of a video where you specifically tell people to put a midships preventers, like, what is going on there? That is somewhere between negligence, ignorance, and stupidity. Somewhere in that Venn diagram, this person exists.
Contacted them, and their response is below.
Oh, well done. Whoa, whoa. Accident report jumps to a conclusion. The people that are doing the investigation on fatalities on a yacht, don't ever think that if you take actions at sea and you end up in court because things have gone very serious, that the people you're going to be talking to have got like polo shirts on and bleached blonde hair and the sunglasses on their head and bare feet and a flipping Leatherman on their hip. When you're in court and that's happening, the people there have got gold on their shoulders and they have decades of experience, master mariner tickets, or experience to a degree that it's just impossible to deny the logic of what they're saying. They don't jump to any conclusion. It doesn't jump to the conclusion that midships preventers are wrong. The experience that has been gained through thousands of years of knowledge has made us experts in rigging and standing sticks up and holding sticks that are trying to move and just generally dealing with physics. There's no jump in that report at all. It's hard, cold facts. Let's have a look further.
It was clearly insufficient in strength for a 70-foot crash drive doing 30 knots of wind. Ignoring the difference of loads in the report, they are claiming that it was the pad-eye which caused the major fail, not the loads it was representing that could have been reduced.
So I said there was a Venn diagram which was somewhere between ignorance, stupidity, and negligence. Between ignorance, stupidity, and negligence. At sea, it is possible to have great things happen, amazing voyages, successful conclusions to difficult circumstances, and it be done in a way that's non-standard. But you can't beat physics. There's no way that you can just adjust the situation around so it suits the way that you sort of see the world. However many years experience you've got, however many clicks you've got on your YouTube, that is not what the report created by professionals says. Unless this person's got some other engineering background that then adds up to it. He's got the experience of being on little boats with little booms, with little loads, with little lines, and it's kind of worked up until now. You want to come on my boat and we'll go out and we'll crash jibe and talk about your midships preventer? You bring any rope you like, I'll break it with that boom on that maxi. No problem. Let's not be confused here. It doesn't work. So where we have our Venn diagram of negligence and ignorance and stupidity, we can now move slightly. Let's get rid of the ignorance. It's just between negligence and stupidity. You have been told by experts this doesn't work, and you are working on the fact that, well, I've never seen it not work. That is how all industrial accidents happen. And this is basically that. If we'd gone back 100 years ago and a yacht doing a job out at sea had fatalities, there would be a commercial seafaring, a Marine Accident Investigation Bureau report on what happened. This person says, well, that doesn't affect me. That's just how I feel. And this is indicative of people that seem to have been in government for the last, let's say, 5 or 6 years around the world, that think that because you think a particular way about something, then that's the way it is. That's not the way it is. That's stupidity, and it is negligent to put that out to people on YouTube when you have the audacity to put a little, that's just, the audacity to put that on YouTube is beyond me.
The pad-eye alone, which may or may not be true. However, they're telling us that the report is intentionally trying to mislead the public. Now the evidence is before you as a juror, and you have two main responsibilities. The first role that you have as a juror is determine the facts. From the evidence that you heard, it is your job, not my job, to determine which is the better of the two. Those would have been significantly different.
Okay, well, I think you can understand pretty clearly what my idea is. You cannot rig midships preventers and call yourself a serious sailor. And anybody anywhere that is telling you that midships preventers are safe needs their fucking head checking. Right, so that's me for today. If you want to get more information like this, then go over to patreon.com/themariner. You can join there and get the videos that we do. Here on my YouTube channel, you'll see that there's things called the Mariner's Library. Every weekday, I read these stories from the Mariner's Library. There's 1,000 books here, all experiences, logbooks. We can see this mistake being made historically. We've already learned from this. You can listen in 20 minutes a day. I try and do like an audiobook presentation, and then those videos that I make that is just sailing and me on the water, I just put the two together just to put it in front of you. It's nice listening to a story and watching boats, okay, but then over on Patreon what we do is we go through those videos and I do a narration on them similar to this, but sometimes a little bit less worked up. And we look at what I'm doing, how we're doing it, what mistakes we're making, what techniques we're using. And that's just $5 a month to get access to those. And there's a lot of them. The book that I'm reading as well, Weston Martyr's The Perfect Ship, otherwise known as The South Seaman. It's got 2 titles. That is an amazing book to learn more about sailing. An incredible review of the building of a boat and a first voyage from someone who went through the Somme in the First World War, who's then telling you how scared he was on a boat. A really amazing read. So Patreon's a place to go and get more details from me. You can connect with me directly. But here on YouTube, please, to help the algorithm, go down below. If you've got more miles than me, you don't need to subscribe. That's the rule on this channel. You get a pass. It's not an issue. But unless you have got more miles than me, you need to press the subscribe button, because we're going to go through these details one by one on all these stupid YouTube videos, and we'll get, with John's help it seems, get to the bottom of it. So give John a like and a subscribe if you can over at the Ministry of Sailing. I'll take one if you've got it, and I'll speak to you in the next one. Cheers.